Conversations in Change is meeting in my apartment this afternoon, and we have some special guests, and we're very excited about that. So I hope you enjoy our little program, and you may remember my co-hostess, Carolyn, and she will introduce our guests, and then we'll start our talk.
Hello, and welcome. And I want to introduce these lovely ladies who have been willing and offered, or been willing, as the case may be, to join us today and share some of their experiences in difficult situations. I want to introduce Henrietta Gilbert and Mabel Thornton. And they have both lost husbands in the last few months, and they have been courageous and kind enough to come and share some of their experiences, which we do want to hear shortly. We wanted to start in a few minutes to start this off by mentioning, just referring back to the last time we talked about stages of grief. We will not go into that again this time, but we wanted to mention some of these symptoms that people have that frighten them so, which these ladies have confirmed with me today. Some of them are physical, some psychological and emotional, and I'm just going to run through several of them. There's a lot of sighing, like you can't get air, physically, loss of appetite. A lot of people have trouble with insomnia. Remember, this is not true of everybody necessarily. They feel like they can't do anything. Heart palpitations from stress, breathlessness, everything they have, like allergies and all sorts of goodies like that, seem to come to the fore. Bad dreams. These in time will go away if it's a normal kind of grief. But it's important to know that you're not absolutely falling apart because of these things. It's to be expected. And emotionally and psychologically, there's a terrible shock we talked about the last time in the beginning, where you're kind of numb. Then you begin to lack trust in yourself. Some people do, not everyone. That you're not able to do anything. You feel crazy, like you're having a nervous breakdown. When I've had losses, I have always seemed to lose concentration. That's the way it affects me, which is very annoying. Many people experience that and think they're losing their minds. Many people feel guilty, and not everybody, and think they should have known what was wrong with the spouse or the child or the friend or whoever is lost. And rationally, that's not possible in most cases, but people seem to harbor guilt in situations like that. We'll talk more about that another time. We tend to idealize the dead sometimes, and are not realistic about things. Some people have visions, and that's not so unheard of, believe me. So those are some of the things that, and at another time we'll talk about when things get out of hand if you need help. But these are normal. Sounds awful, but they're normal, right? You're okay. One of the questions that was raised to us, and we still are encouraging your questions, and we will try to address them in the future, one by one, but one question that was brought up to us last time was, why does grief affect people so differently? And that came out in my conversation with both Henrietta and Mabel this morning. So I think they can address that a lot better than I can. So we wanted to ask you some questions about, and Doreen's gonna take over from here for a while, generally what was helpful to them, how they are coping, and what was not helpful sometimes. A lot of us say dumb things or are afraid to say anything when somebody has lost another person close to them. And out of this, too, comes some of the different ways of grief that they mentioned to me this morning. So, carry on.
All right. Well, I'd like both of you to be able to introduce yourselves to the, not by name, because we know your names now, but to talk a little bit about what this experience has been for you. I think anything you have to offer us will be helpful to the people who are watching, because sooner or later, all of us are going to have to go through some kind of grieving process. It's just part of being human. And we're really grateful to have both of you here with us. So who would like to start? Mabel, would you like to share a little bit for us as to why you were willing to do this and what was helpful to you?
Okay. Well, I met Carolyn in the hall one day, and she was saying to me, I know you're going through a rough time, and you know, it's just rough. And I said to her, I said, well, I'm not going to complain because I feel I've been blessed. And she said, oh, I would like to hear you say that to others. And I said, well, anything that will help someone else, I would do so. Well, my reason for not complaining was I think I had time to accept the fact that my husband was dying for at least a year, maybe.
Yeah.
And we had talked, and with the social worker who came in from hospice, she had asked him, you know, do you want to live? Or he had said, of course, I want to still live. But he said that I know that I have to die, and I'm prepared for it because I have been all my life, more or less, from my parents, saying that, you know, if you are a Christian and if you have faith and try to live a good life, you're going to heaven. He said, I'm not worried about myself, but I'm worried about Mabel and whether or not she can make it.
Yes.
And knowing his condition and knowing that I didn't want to see him constantly struggling, I said, well, Joe, I'll be able to make it okay. Because we had been preparing with Will and all our married lives. We were married for 55 years, whereas he had been the one who had written the checks and taken care of the business. I had always known what was happening.
Right.
And I was prepared. In fact, I had to start writing checks about a year before he died, or more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as I was telling her about taxes, he would fix the taxes and I would check them. So we had our teamwork going.
Yes.
In that sense. And so I felt that maybe I was more prepared than many
Yes.
widows that I've talked with who didn't know anything about the business and who did have,
Yes.
you know, was just at a loss.
Yes.
And then also we had agreed that we would both have a directive, a living will,
Mm-hmm.
and in that if each of us, either of us had the terminal illness, which he did, that we didn't want to go on the respirator and be just kept alive when we really weren't alive.
Right.
So when he came home and went on hospice, I was prepared to know that it wasn't going to last but so long.
Yes.
So I think those things helped me to sort of, I guess maybe I had a lot of my grief beforehand.
I was just going to say that,
Yes.
that you had a long grieving process
Right.
that started over a year before he actually passed away,
Yeah.
which helped prepare you. But then it also makes the process longer.
Longer.
Yes.
And that's hard too. So
Called anticipatory grieving.
Right. And you still have the moments, you know, of you feeling like out of breath, or you're feeling that you're just lonely.
yes.
Because
Yes.
of, you know, after 55 years, you just
Yes.
know this person is going to be there
I know.
because he was always there. And but as I said, I just don't feel like I can complain as such, because we know that death is something that's coming.
Yes.
I
To all of
And
us.
for
Yes.
all of us.
Yes.
Right.
I think some of the things that you have shared, as you did with me earlier about preparing, that the practical things are so important for people, including myself, to learn and to hear.
And we had made
Appreciate
the
that.
funeral arrangements as such as, you know, the grave site and everything
Yes.
except the funeral itself we had done.
Yes.
So I did not have to go through all of
All
that.
of that.
And,
That's something.
And your sharing it with us helps people who are watching to think, well, and I think that's why we wanted to do this show, is so that people could get some help from each other, and extend, you know, what our experiences are to the next person. So, thank you, Mabel. That's really, my sense of you is that you're a very strong lady, and that,
and I have been through much grief. Of course, nothing like the spouse, but
No.
With parents, and
yes.
I was sharing that I'm one of 11 children,
Oh.
and there are only 4 of us left,
Ooh.
girls.
So you have had losses.
Yes, but then with Joe's death, it brings back, especially my brothers. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sort of grieving for them over
Yes.
again, because I feel that if they were here, they would be, you know, a support.
Be there for you, of
Yeah.
course.
And this
Of
is
course.
typical. I mean, you know, it's not abnormal. It's
No.
perfectly normal, as we had talked about. And it brings back other deaths, too, and yet also the fondness for those people.
Do you think being here at Greenspring has been helpful to you? Do you think moving here before he became so ill was a wise move?
Very helpful,
Was
because we had decided to sell the house and move before he actually had come down as such.
Yes.
He was still on his feet driving. In fact, he drove over here when we were coming for
Right.
the interviews and all.
Yes.
But the fact that I didn't have to deal with the house, that was, you know,
Yes.
good. And I didn't have the steps.
Yes.
Because he had just gotten so that the steps were a problem.
Right.
Just the month before we moved here.
Right.
Going up and down the steps and wondering, you know, how is he going to make it? And the blessing, again, and I had to look back at him, the night before we were to move, he went in the hospital. Because we'd been wondering, now how are we going to get, my daughter said, how are we going to get Daddy downstairs and into the car and whatever that day? But he went in the hospital the night before we moved. So he was there for about 4 or 5 days after we had moved.
Well, you were in the moving process, which was a blessing,
Right,
really,
right.
wasn't it?
We had everything.
Yes.
But, so as I said, I just feel that I was maybe more prepared than most widows are. Because in the moving process, we had gotten rid of things and all of that, and we didn't have to go through that. And
that's always difficult, especially when you have to discard these things that you've had for many, many years, and it's important to you. Even the simplest things are important to you. So it's good to know that you have such a good attitude for it. I had a similar experience, except that my husband decided when we were in day, which was very comfortable, and we didn't really need anyone to come in and help us, but it sounded like a very good idea, and so the
You mean to move here?
Yes.
Sounded like a good idea to come
Yes.
to Greenspring.
to Greenspring, and we were glad after we had moved that he was pleased with the move.
And your children were up here. That was
Yes,
one reason.
they
you
were here.
left
They
Florida, am I
picked
right?
it out, yeah.
Well, and your husband added a great deal to Greenspring. He shared his gifts with us.
Yes.
He was a wonderful magician, and he shared that with us. And I think that was probably a good thing for him too, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
He enjoyed it, didn't
Yes,
he?
he did.
Yes.
And his humor.
Mhm.
And his singing. Even in the dining room. I'll never forget. He would welcome me to the dining room with song and a red bow tie.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
That is very good time.
Yes.
So as his health declined, Henrietta, do you feel like, Mabel, that you had a little preparation for the day that was coming?
I really didn't.
You didn't?
I didn't have that
Feeling.
reassurance.
Yeah.
I felt, well, that he was the important one and what he wanted done was the important thing. So we got his hospital bed into the bedroom, and he was there a very few days, and he died just very peacefully. And I still say, if anybody could have seen him in the state that he was in, they would have understood that I did not have tears to shed for him.
Do you want to explain that like you did to me earlier, just a little bit, that why you felt that you didn't have tears at the end for his sake?
Well, he was not aware. He was just, he was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can say. And he didn't mind the idea of leaving. And he looked like he was almost happy at the time.
You had indicated earlier today, the reason I brought that up was you indicated that you felt that he was better off than what he was going through here.
Yes.
And that's why I mentioned it again, because I think it helps people, all of us, to know that sometimes we need to come to grips with that for the other person.
That's true.
Yes.
So, Henrietta, what has been the most helpful thing about being at Greenspring since Earl's death?
I think it's making friends and going down to have dinner with friends. Otherwise, we could have cleared it up in a few minutes.
Yes.
But you can't when you have friends.
That's right.
I wanted to ask or bring in this question about why does grief affect people so differently? And several of you had mentioned how differently your family members sometimes were affected by these things, and how at Christmas time it helped, your families helped you by talking. I think that was very moving and important. Do you mind?
No, I
bringing that up?
had been telling Carolyn about this past Christmas. I was able to go to my middle daughter's home in Nashville, Tennessee, and the others came down. And on Christmas Day, after we had eaten, and we began to talk, and of course we always sing together. That's one of the things we do as a family at holiday times. But they allowed me to just talk about their father and about my brothers and sisters, just talk about them and their deaths, and then stories about them in their lives, as well as my father. I still find it hard to talk about my mother, really. You know, she's been dead 60-some years, but it was a very, I think, healing experience.
Yes.
Because I did cry some, and I'm not an easy person to cry. and telling how grief affect different ones. I have one sister who cries, just cries. She can cry. Like she cried more than I did, much more than I did with my husband's death, because they were very close. But and I had one brother, I never saw him cry. And of course my husband, I don't think I ever saw him, and his parents. He said he'd never seen his parents cry, tears, and yet they had sadness, much sadness.
Oh yes.
And then there are others who just go into themselves. And I have one daughter who sort of does that, and I was happy that she was the one who was able to sit by him. And I think this was another helpful thing, because since he was home and we saw him that Sunday, we could see things happening. But he still was very clear. Our oldest granddaughter had finished college the Sunday before, and she called, and he was able to talk to her and congratulate her on the phone.
Oh, that was nice.
But the next day, when the nurse had come in and said that, well, it could be hours and it could be days, this daughter, the youngest one, came over about 4, I guess it was, and she went and sat by her daddy and just saw singing. He loved to hear her sing, because he loved to sing himself.
Isn't that wonderful?
And she sang almost, I had to make her move in about 2 hours. But he had one spot of a struggle, but then he just laid there peaceful. And when he died, the breath just left his body. No struggle whatsoever. And I think that was very helpful to all of us who were around
It
that
always
day.
is.
To see that was, he was just gone.
I think there are a couple of really important things here that can help us all. And one is that to allow people to talk about it. And we're all from a generation. And we talked a lot about this earlier today. A lot of us were not allowed to express these feelings much about grief. And that's relatively new in Western civilization, not new to other civilizations, I might add. My Korean family is very used to going through rituals every year. Goodness, we in the Western culture do not do that. So this is very helpful, and I love the fact that we talked about this in our Coping with Holidays, how important it is and helpful to talk about the people who have gone on, daddy, grandpa, grandma, and so forth, and have the children know who these people were. So I think that's really important. We will deal more in the future with this question that was asked, among others, about how different people grieve differently. But I think this shows that there are different ways of grieving, even with our 2 friends here and with the members of their family.
And I'd like to ask a question, Carolyn, because I'll bet you that there are people watching this who would like to ask this question too. From what you said, it helped you a lot to talk about your husband with your family, of course, at the holidays. And you kind of said it helps to have friends to come down and eat with and talk to. The people who don't know you well, but who live here at Greenspring, those of us who are your acquaintances or your friends, but not as close as family, is it helpful for us to bring up your husbands and ask you to talk about them? Or I think most of us kind of shy away from that. We think, oh dear, that'll just upset them if we bring them up. But I'm hearing you say that this is something that's really nice to be able to talk about.
It is.
I think so.
Is that so? It would be welcomed.
Yes, it would be.
That's good to know. I think we're drawing to an end, and I think that one of the things we wanted to remind ourselves and people who have just had a loss, unlike ourselves, we have not had this major loss. We've had many losses, but not the major spouse or children. But I think we have to remember that you're still you. And we talked a lot about this earlier, that in our generation, you were considered someone's wife the women particularly, and somebody's mother, grandmother, caretaker for all those who become ill. But there's a wonderful article in the Washington Post yesterday about this by Gail Sheehy, that you're still you're still the person that Joseph and Earl fell in love with. You have your own destiny, even though you are somebody's wife, mother, grandmother. And our generations are changing that way. And there are things for you to do. Don't forget that. And I think another thing, a friend told me who's lost 2 children and a husband, told me the thing that helped her the most, she didn't want to come on television, but that wonderful serenity prayer, you know, that says something like, give me the courage to change the things that can be changed, and the willingness to accept what can't be changed, similar to that. I'm not quite quoting right. And the wisdom to know the difference was the biggest help to her. And I found that a big help in life. I wanted to mention I have many books on grief if anyone wants to contact me and borrow them. But the latest one that is out that has just won a national award and is considered the best one in grief that's ever been written, I do not know, I haven't read it, but it is called Magical Thinking, strangely enough, and it is by Joan Didion, who lost her husband and her child. And I have a lovely poem we would like to Northern Virginia, which I mentioned to you before. The author's unknown. When I am gone, release me, let me go. I have so many things to see and do. You mustn't tie yourself to me with tears. Be thankful for our many beautiful years. I have gone now, but you can only guess how much you gave to me in happiness. I thank you for the love each of you has shown, but now it's time I travel alone. Cry myself, and I'm not a cry. Didn't think. I won't be far away, for life goes on. So if you need me, call and I will come. Though you can't see or touch me, I'll be near. And if you listen with your heart, you'll hear all my love around you, soft and clear. And then, when you must come this way alone, I'll greet you with a smile and say, welcome home.
That's a very lovely poem, I think.
I do too.
Well, we want to thank both of you for coming and sharing with us today.
Absolutely.
And it was, and I want to thank this crew for coming up here and doing such a wonderful job in this little apartment. So,
and you
Carolyn,
for having us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
it was just a lovely experience for Carolyn and for me, and
Absolutely.
and I do appreciate it. So,
And you're courageous ladies.
and we'll be back. If any of you would like to appear with us, let us know, and we'll plan another day around some new faces.
And we're keeping a file of your questions, so we will be addressing them. So please keep your comments and questions coming.